Have you ever thought about that strange gap in the Bible? One moment, Jesus is 12 years old in the temple, amazing the elders with his knowledge. Then, suddenly, he's 30, getting baptized in the Jordan River, ready to begin his work. What happened in those missing 18 years? Where was the man who would become the most important spiritual figure in Western history during the prime years of his life? This isn't just a small missing detail. It might be one of the biggest untold stories in human spiritual growth. These missing years weren't just forgotten, they were taken out on purpose. The real question isn't just where Jesus was, but why this part of his life was cut out from the story we were told. Think about it. What if the roots of Western spirituality were based on only a small part of Jesus' actual life? What if Jesus didn't grow up only within the Jewish world, but also learned from powerful spiritual traditions in Asia? That would totally change how we see his message, his purpose, and the idea that there's a strict line between Eastern and Western spirituality. There's surprising evidence hidden in plain sight that shows something amazing. During those missing years, Jesus may have traveled far outside of Judea. He could have followed old trade routes that connected the Mediterranean with places like India, Tibet, and Persia for hundreds of years. In temples, monasteries, and secret schools around the ancient world, Jesus didn't just visit, he studied deeply. He learned secret teachings that would shape everything he later shared. Let's first look at what the official Bible says, and more importantly, what it leaves out. The accepted Gospels tell us about Jesus' birth, then mention him again at age 12, discussing with teachers in the temple. After that, silence. Nothing until he's 30, when he starts his ministry. That 18-year gap makes up over half of his life before he started teaching. That's a huge missing piece for someone whose life is supposed to be fully known. What makes this even more interesting is that the gap wasn't always there. In the early years of Christianity, there were many writings that talked about what Jesus did during those lost years. Books like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the Arabic Infancy Gospel, and other bits of stories filled in what the main Gospels left out. But when church leaders met at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE under the rule of Emperor Constantine, these writings were left out on purpose. Why? Because many of them said that Jesus traveled outside of Judea and learned from wise teachers in the East and in Egypt. This kind of story didn't match what the early Roman Church wanted people to believe. A Jesus who learned from Buddhists in India, from Hindu priests, or from Egyptian mystics, would challenge the idea that his wisdom was one of a kind. Instead, it would show that his message was part of a bigger, global, spiritual truth. When we look at the history, these kinds of journeys weren't just possible, they were likely. The ancient world was much more connected than people usually think. By the 1st century CE, trade routes already linked to the Roman Empire with places like India and China. The Silk Road had existed for hundreds of years. Alexandria, in Egypt, was the center of learning at the time. It had the largest library in the world and brought together thinkers from everywhere. Jewish communities had also spread across this vast network. Large groups of Jews lived in Alexandria, Babylon, Persia, and even India. They had synagogues and stayed in touch with Jerusalem. So, if a young Jewish man had deep spiritual questions, he could have easily followed these routes, connecting with Jewish groups in faraway lands. Now think about the time in history when Jesus would have been a young man. During those very missing years, the Roman Empire was going through its most peaceful time, the Pax Romana. This made travel across long distances much safer than usual. In fact, it may have been one of the best times in history for someone to travel far. And that's exactly when Jesus' story goes silent. But it's not just guesswork. There are some interesting clues that Jesus really did travel during these lost years. For example, old Buddhist writings mention a wise man named Issa, who came from the West to study in India and Tibet around the same time. In 1987, a Russian traveler named Nicholas Notovich said he found ancient writings at the Hemis Monastery in Ladakh. These texts told about Jesus called Issa spending time in India and Tibet. They said he learned from Buddhist monks and Hindu teachers, mastering meditation and deep spiritual knowledge before returning home. Even though some people questioned his story, later researchers like Swami Abhedananda and Nicholas Roerich said they also found proof of these texts. What's even more interesting are the strong connections between Jesus' teachings and Eastern ideas. His messages about loving your enemies, staying peaceful, and using parables are very close to Buddhist teachings that had existed for hundreds of years before him. His focus on the inner kingdom instead of outer rituals is similar to Vedanta teachings about self-realization. These aren't just random connections, they show clear influence from Eastern spiritual thinking, which wasn't common in Jewish teachings of that time. Even the words Jesus used give us clues. When he called himself the Son of Man, he used the Aramaic phrase Bar Nasha. This exact phrase was found in Buddhist writings that had been translated into Aramaic back then. It was used to describe someone spiritually awake, someone who had gone beyond normal thinking. These Buddhist writings were found in areas like northern India and Bactria, where Jewish groups lived too. Jesus also often talked about the way when explaining his path. This is very close to the Buddhist idea of the path and the Taoist idea of the way or Tao. These are not just similar words, they are key terms from Eastern teachings that somehow made it into what Jesus said. The clues aren't just in old books. There's also a place in Kashmir called the Rosa Ball Tomb. Local stories say it's the burial place of a man named Yuz Asaph, a holy man who came from the West and taught wisdom that sounds a lot like Jesus' teachings. Some scholars believe that Yuz Asaph could actually be Jesus, and the name itself may be a version of the name Jesus. The tomb believed to belong to Yuz Asaph is built facing east to west, which matches traditional Jewish burial customs. That's very different from Islamic graves, which are usually north to south. But even more powerful than these physical clues are Jesus' own teachings. When Jesus finally appeared in public at age 30 to begin his ministry, he spoke with a level of wisdom and authority that shocked even the religious leaders of his time. Again and again, people asked, where did he get this knowledge? It was clear to them that his teachings went far beyond anything a person from Galilee could have learned through normal religious schooling. Jesus seemed to have a deep understanding of many spiritual traditions. He didn't just borrow ideas, he blended them in a way that showed real mastery. Take the famous Sermon on the Mount. Many Bible scholars agree that it was a major shift from standard Jewish thinking. But when you compare it to Buddhist texts, especially the Dhammapada, the similarities are surprising. The Beatitudes, which speak of humility, compassion, and being peacemakers, mirror key teachings in Buddhism about the path to enlightenment. His focus on letting go of desire and attachment also fits closely with Buddhist ideas. Even how Jesus taught using parables and puzzling questions feels a lot like Zen Buddhist methods, where teachers guide students through short stories or riddles to spark insight. One of Jesus' sayings, "Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves," lines up with Taoist ideas about balancing opposites. And his teaching that the kingdom of heaven is within you matches the Upanishads, ancient Indian texts that say the divine spirit lives inside each person, known as Atman. These ideas didn't exist in the Jewish religion at the time. So the real question isn't if Jesus shared ideas with Eastern traditions. We can clearly see that in the texts. The question is, How did he learn them if he never traveled and studied them himself? It becomes even more interesting when you look at how Jesus healed people. He often used touch, energy, and focused on the belief or faith of the person being healed. These are common methods in Eastern medicine, especially in Ayurveda and Tibetan healing. Jesus also went off alone to pray and meditate, often something common in Eastern spiritual practice, but not a typical Jewish custom at the time. Egypt may have also played a key role in shaping Jesus' path. The Gospel of Matthew briefly says Jesus' family fled to Egypt when he was a baby to escape King Herod, but it doesn't say how long they stayed or what they did there. Egypt had been a center of spiritual knowledge for thousands of years. It was home to mystery schools that taught deep truths about energy, consciousness, and inner transformation. In Alexandria, a famous city in Egypt, Greek, Jewish, Egyptian, and Eastern ideas all came together. Its great library and museum made it a meeting place for the most advanced thinking in the ancient world. Near Alexandria, there was also a special Jewish group called the Therapeutic. They were known for their healing and meditation practices, very similar to the things Jesus later did. In fact, their name means healers, the same word often used to describe Jesus himself. The more you look, the clearer it becomes. Many of Jesus' teachings have strong connections to Egyptian and Eastern spiritual wisdom. Jesus' focus on resurrection connects strongly with the central mysteries of ancient Egypt. When he talked about being born again, he was using language that matches the initiation rituals of the Egyptian mystery schools. Even his famous line, "Before Abraham was, I am," closely mirrors the Egyptian concept of eternal consciousness. In Egyptian mysticism, the phrase "I am" that I am expressed the timeless, divine nature of the soul. These aren't just surface-level similarities. They are deep spiritual ideas that were taught and protected within Egyptian spiritual traditions. Jesus didn't just know about these concepts. He seemed to understand them in a deep, personal way, suggesting he learned them directly from those who taught such wisdom. But this leads to an important question. If Jesus had all this advanced spiritual knowledge and training, why isn't it mentioned in the Bible? Why would such a powerful part of his story be hidden? The answer lies in early church politics. As Christianity grew and became more organized, especially by the 4th century AD, church leaders needed to present it as the one true path, completely separate from other religions and philosophies. When the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its official religion, the pressure increased. Leaders had to make Christianity look unique and superior to all the other spiritual paths that were popular at the time. But a version of Jesus who had studied with Eastern masters, who had learned from Egyptian mystery schools, and who drew wisdom from many sources well, that kind of story made Jesus look more like a spiritual bridge builder than the founder of a brand new exclusive religion that wasn't helpful for the church's agenda. So, during events like the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and later church councils, leaders made choices that shaped which teachings stayed and which ones were erased. Stories about Jesus' travels and spiritual training in the East were declared heresy, burned, or simply left out of official copies of Scripture. Over time, those stories disappeared. What we're left with today is a carefully chosen version of Jesus' life, one that served the goals of church leaders, not necessarily the full truth. This wasn't just a change in history. It changed the whole direction of Western spirituality. By cutting Jesus off from Eastern wisdom and the Egyptian mystical tradition, the Church created a false divide, one that still separates East and West today. Imagine how different things could be if we had embraced all of Jesus' journey, not just the part that fit a narrow narrative. We might see Christianity and other spiritual paths not as rivals, but as different expressions of one shared truth. So what does all this mean for us now? It means we can approach Jesus' teachings with new understanding. When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," we can hear the echo of the ancient Indian teaching that Tivam Asai, that thou art, which says divine consciousness lives within each of us. When Jesus taught love for enemies and the power of forgiveness, we can see the influence of Buddhist compassion practices. His teaching to live in the world but not be attached to it sounds a lot like Taoist wisdom about acting without clinging to results. This doesn't make Jesus any less important. In fact, it makes him even more remarkable. Rather than seeing him as the founder of just one religion, we can appreciate him as someone who understood the core truths behind many paths, and then shared them in a way his people could understand. Jesus wasn't just a teacher, he was a bridge. A bridge between worlds, between East and West, between traditions and truths. He seemed to understand that at the heart of every true spiritual path, the same universal principles could be found: love, compassion, awareness, and inner transformation. This perspective changes everything. For your own spiritual journey, it means freedom from feeling like you have to choose one path and reject the rest. Practices like meditation, mindfulness, compassion, and being fully present in the moment, these aren't foreign to Jesus' way. In fact, they were likely a core part of his personal growth. You don't have to pick between following Jesus and exploring meditation, yoga, or Buddhist philosophy. These teachings likely shaped him, and they can support you too. Here's a simple practice you can try, something Jesus may have learned during his time in the East. Just sit in silence for 5 minutes a day. Close your eyes and focus on your breath. When thoughts come, don't judge them, just gently return to your breath. This basic mindfulness exercise, central to Buddhism, echoes Jesus' teaching to watch and pray and to go into your closet for silent communion with God. It's about turning inward, finding stillness. You can also deepen your understanding by reading the Gospels alongside Eastern texts like the Dhammapada, the Tao Te Ching, or the Upanishads. Look for the parallels, teachings on non-attachment, compassion, and the illusion of material wealth. These shared insights point to one universal truth, not many competing ones. Take Jesus' command to love your enemies. That's not just a beautiful idea, it's a powerful practice. Try the Buddhist metta, loving kindness, meditation. Sit quietly and send good thoughts to people you love, then to people you're neutral about, and finally, even to those who've hurt you. This exercise helps bring Jesus' radical love into your everyday life, not just as an idea, but as an experience. If you're drawn to healing, look into Eastern ideas of energy, like prana or chi, the life force flowing through all things. Jesus often healed with touch, with energy. He said, "Power has gone out from me." This kind of healing wasn't magic, it was mastery of spiritual energy. Learning simple energy practices today can reconnect you with a part of Jesus' work that's been mostly forgotten in modern Christianity. Even how Jesus taught reflects Eastern wisdom. His use of paradox, saying things like, "The first will be last," or "lose your life to find it," is very similar to Zen or Taoist ways of pointing to truth. It's not always about clear answers. Sometimes it's about holding mystery, allowing tension, and letting deeper understanding unfold naturally. But maybe the most powerful takeaway is this: when we see Jesus as someone who walked between worlds, we're invited to do the same. In a world still divided by religion, ideology, and fear, we can be spiritual bridge builders, people who look for what unites us, not what separates us. We can honor every path that speaks truth and love, just as Jesus likely did. The story of Jesus' missing years isn't just a mystery, it's an invitation. An invitation to go beyond the boundaries, beyond the labels, and discover for yourself the universal wisdom that lives at the heart of every spiritual path. What if there's only one universal path expressed in many languages, cultures, and stories? What if Jesus knew this? What if his real mission was to translate timeless Eastern insights into a form his Mediterranean audience could understand? When we see it this way, Jesus stops being a figure claimed by just one religion. Instead, he becomes something far greater, a unifying messenger of a truth that belongs to everyone. His so-called missing years aren't just a mysterious gap in his biography, they're a key to unlocking a deeper, more universal spirituality. Look closely at what Jesus taught: compassion, non-attachment, meditative awareness, the divine within. These aren't exclusive to Christianity. They are the golden thread running through all authentic spiritual paths. So maybe the real question isn't whether Jesus studied in India, Tibet, or Egypt. Maybe the real question is, how does this understanding change how we walk our own spiritual path today? If Jesus found wisdom across traditions, maybe we can too. If he saw through the outer forms to the inner truth, maybe it's time we do the same. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, are you confining your spiritual journey to one tradition, while a deeper truth is waiting just beyond the boundary? Are you clinging to separation when integration might set you free? Jesus' example shows us spiritual depth comes not from isolation, but from connection. Not from building walls, but from building bridges. The most powerful message of Jesus' hidden years is this: the divine doesn't reveal itself through one path alone, it shines through many. The light Jesus spoke of comes not through a single window, but through countless ones, each offering a different yet equally valid view of the same eternal reality. By recovering this hidden chapter of his life, we don't just rediscover him, we begin to rediscover ourselves. If this message has stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe now. Join this journey of remembering what was lost and reclaiming what connects us all. Each subscription isn't just a number, it's a soul awakening to the deeper truth behind the story we were told. Because true wisdom, as Jesus himself discovered, doesn't come from blindly following what's official. It comes from listening for what's been quietly hidden, and finally, bringing it into the light.